Have you ever had a moment when a single sentence felt powerful enough to turn your entire life upside down? I experienced mine on a Tuesday morning, sitting in a black leather chair inside a downtown Chicago bank branch, holding a folder that contained 40 years of my life, 4 decades of effort reduced to a handful of paper statements numbered, and 1 transfer order for $450,000. Everything I had ever saved. My name is Ann Miller, 61 years old. Until that morning, I believed motherhood meant giving endlessly, even when your own child crushed your dignity without an ounce of regret. For so many years, I convinced myself that a mother's love had no limits, that children would naturally protect and cherish it. I was mistaken. When my phone buzzed, Daniel's name, my only son, appeared on the screen. I had raised him alone. After my husband John died, when Daniel was 9, my heartbeat quickened, not because I feared something was wrong, but because it was unusual for him to contact me first. Ever since he married Emily, our conversations had become distant and hollow. The kind someone gives only when they want something. The message said, "Mom, about Emily's birthday dinner tomorrow at Maple and Vine. Please don't come. Emily doesn't want you there. You make people uncomfortable. It's better if you don't show up." I read it once, then again and again. The words stayed the same, though my mind emptied. In that exact moment, I was sitting across from the bank manager, preparing to transfer $450,000 to finalize the purchase of a luxury condo in Northridge, Daniel and Emily's dream home. And right as I was signing the documents, my son sent a message telling me I wasn't welcome in the very family I had helped build. The irony was so sharp, it almost felt amusing. I was about to give away every cent I had ever earned for the home of a son who was simultaneously erasing me from his life. "Are you okay, Mrs. Miller?" Gerald, the bank manager, asked when he noticed the color drain from my face. I wasn't okay, but something inside me shifted. For the first time in my life, I understood the gap between being a mother and being a doormat. "May I make a phone call?" I asked. Stepping into the private room, my hands trembled not out of fear, but from a slow-growing anger rising in my chest. Daniel picked up immediately. "Hey, Mom, you got my message, right?" His tone was casual, as though crossing his mother off an invitation list was nothing unusual. "I did, son," I said. "I just wanted to be sure I understood it correctly." "Oh, Mom, don't take it so hard." Emily's just stressed. "You know how she is. She's a perfectionist. She's hosting some important people tomorrow. Co-workers, clients. She wants everything to be perfect. Perfect. Meaning a dinner without the woman who spent 30 years teaching school, then opened a small craft shop to pay for his college. So I make things less perfect?" I asked softly. No, it's not like that. She's just afraid you'll feel out of place. Everyone's from a different background, a different status. A different status, I repeated slowly. "And in your eyes, Daniel, which one do I belong to?" "Mom, stop turning it into something dramatic. Emily's family is traditional. They live in a certain way, and you're just simpler. Simpler. The polite word people used when they wanted to shrink you." "Don't worry, son, I understand," I said. "Great, I knew you would. We can have lunch Sunday. Just the 3 of us. Something quiet. A safe lunch with the embarrassing mother." "All right then. Goodbye, Daniel." I hung up and sat still, watching people hurry in and out of the bank, each absorbed in their own life. And I sat there, seconds away from giving my life savings to a son who treated me like an inconvenience. But something inside me cleared. The fog I'd been living in for years suddenly lifted. I realized my worth existed only as long as my wallet was open. I walked back to Gerald's desk, more certain than ever. "I've changed my mind. Cancel the transfer." He blinked, shocked. "Ma'am, everything is ready. The sellers are waiting. It's a very large amount. $450,000. Cancel it. Are you sure?" "There may be penalties." "I'm absolutely sure." "May I ask why?" I smiled faintly. "Because I just realized I deserve more respect than this." While he turned to his computer, memories resurfaced. Daniel at the kitchen table doing homework while I graded papers. The nights I stayed up crafting handmade items to sell for his school fees. The weekends I sacrificed rest so he could attend English classes. The dinners I skipped. The movies I never saw. The clothes I never bought just so he never felt deprived. "Mom, when I grow up, I'll take care of you," he once told me at 10 years old. "You don't need to, sweetheart," I had replied. "Just love me." I had been naive. I thought love meant appreciation, respect, understanding. For him, love was politeness squeezed between bills. "It's done, Mrs. Miller," Gerald said. The transfer is canceled. Your money is safe. Thank you. I left the bank feeling different, not exactly relieved, not quite sad, more like I had finally awakened from a long sleep where I was being used without realizing. In the car, I sat still before texting Daniel, "It's all right, son. Enjoy the dinner." Short, calm. No anger, no explanation, just the truth that I was welcome only when money was involved. Driving home, I thought of all the signs I had ignored. The rare visits, the gathering I wasn't invited to, the conversations that made me feel like an outsider. I remembered last Christmas when I brought a whole homemade feast I worked 2 days on, and Emily opened the door saying, "Oh, Mrs. Miller, you shouldn't have. We already ordered catering. Now we'll have too much food," as if love itself could spoil. Or the time Daniel introduced me to a colleague, "This is my mom. She runs a small craft shop." Not the single mother who raised him alone. Just a small shop, enough to erase every sacrifice. The dismissals had been chipping away at me for years. "Mom, that place isn't your style. Mom, that restaurant's too upscale. And finally, Mom, you make people uncomfortable." When I reached home, I sat on the porch, the same spot where John used to read the paper on Sundays. If he were alive, he would have said I'd allowed too much for far too long. "Anne, you've got a good heart," he always warned. "But don't let anyone use it against you." He understood my weakness, that I confused love with endless tolerance. The phone rang. It was Daniel. He must have already heard from the real estate office. "Mom," the company called. "They said the transfer was canceled." "Must be a bank mistake." "Not a mistake, Daniel." Silence. "What do you mean, not a mistake?" "I canceled it." "You did what?" "Why?" "Because I changed my mind." "Mom, that's crazy. We planned everything, the house, the furniture, the curtains Emily chose." "Your plans, Daniel, not mine. But you promised to help, and I have helped for 30 years, and now I'm tired." "Tired of what?" "Tired of being treated like something to be managed instead of a mother to be respected." He said nothing because he knew the truth. He knew his text message and my decision were connected. "Mom, the dinner thing has nothing to do with this. They're separate." "No, Daniel, they're the same. They show exactly how you see me. We treat you fine." "No, you tolerate me. That's not the same. You're being unfair." "Unfair is being excluded from my own family on the same day I was about to hand you my entire life savings." "But those two things aren't related." "They are. They're both about dignity, gratitude, and respect." I had no idea then that canceling that transfer was only the start, the first step in a much bigger story filled with betrayal, hidden truths, and consequences I never imagined I'd be strong enough to set in motion. A few weeks later, I discovered something about my son. What I discovered shattered everything I believed I knew about him and about myself. No longer carrying the weight of pretending I was devoted to people who disrespected me. No longer feeling forced to be the perfect mother who gives endlessly without ever being noticed. I woke the next morning with a freedom I hadn't felt in decades. The day after that, Daniel began calling nonstop. I let each call ring into voicemail. I needed the quiet time to absorb what had happened and what it meant for the future ahead of me. By late afternoon, Emily's messages started appearing. Polite in the beginning, then gradually frantic. "Mrs. Miller, can we talk? There must be some misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding? Cutting your mother-in-law out of your life, that's a misunderstanding." Days slipped by, then weeks. Their calls faded away. I went back to working at my small craft shop. Golden Hands, the place where I had turned my passion into a livelihood after retiring from teaching. My closest friend, Linda, who owns the bakery next door, was the only person I told. "You did the right thing, Anne," she said one Saturday morning with a cup of coffee between her hands. "It's about time they realized you're not a walking ATM." At the end of that month, an unexpected call came not from Emily or Daniel, but from Gerald, the bank manager. "Mrs. Miller, I need you to come in. It's delicate, and I can't discuss it by phone." His tone unsettled me. We set an appointment for Monday morning. When I arrived, instead of our regular seats, I was guided into a private conference room. Gerald was there already, along with a woman in a gray suit who introduced herself as Mariana for internal auditing. "Mrs. Miller," she began softly, "what I'm about to say isn't easy, and I'll need your full attention." My heart raced. I assumed it had something to do with the canceled transfer, maybe a fee or policy complication. "After you canceled the $450,000 transaction, our system automatically triggered a review," Gerald explained carefully. "We uncovered a strange withdrawal pattern, small but regular transactions every month for 5 years. Withdrawals, but I haven't taken anything out. Exactly, Mariana replied, sliding a folder across the table. That's the unusual part. We found transfers of about $2,000 each month going to a business account, all bearing what appears to be your signature. I opened the folder. Dozens of forms stared back at me, each one signed with a version of my name. Almost my handwriting, but not quite. That's not my signature. We know, Gerald said. Our handwriting specialists confirmed they're forged. Very sophisticated, but forged nonetheless. What does that mean? I asked, though deep inside, I think I already understood. It means someone with access to your banking information has been quietly taking money for years, around $120,000 in total. Breath felt impossible. The room tilted. Where did it go? Mariana slid over another document. Transfers directed to a business account named Preston Architecture and Design, opened 5 years earlier. Preston, Emily's maiden name, the business she always bragged about building on her own. Does your son have access to your account? Mariana asked. Not officially, I said. But he used to come to the bank with me. He knows all the details, the paperwork, everything. They exchanged looks. By policy, Gerald said quietly, we're required to report this to the authorities, but because it's family, I can give you 48 hours before we file. I left the bank barely able to walk. My heart sank, not only because of the money, though $120,000 was most of what I had worked for, but because of the betrayal. A deliberate theft. For years, my own son, the boy who once promised he'd always take care of me, had been forging my signature to funnel money to his wife. Without thinking, I drove to Grant Park. I needed air. Sitting on a bench near the lake, tears finally came, not from sorrow but from rage, a deep, raw anger I had never known. My phone rang. Anne, where are you? Linda's voice said, I stopped by the shop. Your clerk told me you weren't in. Linda, can you come to the lake? I need you. Less than an hour later, she sat beside me, listening as I told her everything. When I finished, she squeezed my hand. What are you going to do? Such a simple question, but heavy. Take it to the police, I muttered, but I already knew how that would end. Daniel defending Emily, Emily pretending innocence, and me being branded the awful mother who turned in her own son. I think I'm going to teach them a lesson, I said, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. What kind of lesson? I'm not sure yet, but one they won't forget. Over the next days, a strange calm settled over me. I called Gerald and asked for 1 more week before he filed the report. I'll take care of it myself, I told him. He hesitated, then agreed. That week, I studied everything about Emily's company, its clients, its projects, its debts, its contracts. I even visited their tiny office in Lincoln Park, watching their routines and noting every weakness. Knowledge is power, and I gathered every piece. On the 4th day, a man named Lawrence Barnes walked into my shop searching for a retirement gift for his secretary. I want something that shows appreciation, he said. While helping him choose, I learned he was a corporate and criminal attorney. Perfect timing. When he paid, he handed me his business card. If you ever need legal advice, feel free to call. And you have a wonderful store. I slipped the card into my pocket. That night, as I drafted my plan, I realized someone like him was exact what I needed to ensure everything I did remained within the law. The next day, I called Mr. Barnes and scheduled a meeting. After hearing my story, he said, what you're considering isn't conventional, but if done properly, it won't break any laws. We'll make sure you're protected. With his help, I prepared 3 documents. A detailed report of the embezzlement, a written confession of complicity, and a transfer agreement giving me full ownership of Preston Architecture and Design, completely legal, though the path itself wasn't completely moral. Next came the invitation. After 2 weeks of silence, I called Daniel on a Thursday evening. It's Mom. He sounded startled. Mom, are you okay? I've been worried. You vanished. I'm fine. I just needed time to think. He softened his voice, cautious. I understand. I've thought about everything, the apartment, all of it, I said. Maybe I reacted too strongly. I want to talk to you and Emily in person. Maybe we can start again. Relief poured into his tone. Of course, Mom. We can come to your place. Or actually, I interrupted. Let's meet somewhere neutral. Dinner at Maple and Vine, maybe? I remember it's Emily's favorite. A short pause followed. He must have recognized the irony meeting at the very restaurant where they once told me not to come, but the hope of getting the apartment money back must have outweighed his discomfort. That's perfect, Mom. Emily will love that. Good. I'll make the reservation for Saturday night. Thank you for reconsidering. I hung up, sadness and resolve mixing inside me. My only son was about to meet the truth, but there was no going back now. Some wounds cut too deep for forgiveness. 2 days later, every detail of the plan was finalized. I booked a quiet corner table at Maple and Vine, worked with Lauren to finish the paperwork, and rehearsed everything I needed to say. I asked Linda, my closest friend, and the only one who knew everything, to stay nearby in case I needed her later. Saturday night, I dressed not to impress, but to feel strong. I chose a simple dark blue dress, silver earrings John gave me on our last anniversary, and a soft red lipstick. I wasn't getting ready for them. I was preparing for battle. I arrived 20 minutes early. The waiter guided me to the reserved corner table, overlooking the garden glimmering with string lights. At exactly 8 p.m. sharp, at 8, I saw Daniel and Emily walk in. He was punctual, as he had always been a habit I'd drilled into him since childhood. I watched them approach the table. Daniel looked tense, though he tried to mask it with a hopeful expression. Emily smiled flawlessly, yet her eyes were icy. She wore a fitted black dress, and delicate jewelry pieces I knew very well had been purchased with my money. Mom. Daniel hugged me tightly. "It's wonderful to see you again, Mrs. Miller," Emily said, shaking my hand with perfect politeness. "You look lovely tonight." "Thank you. And you both look very nice, too." We sat and ordered drinks. I asked for a glass of red wine, something I hardly ever touched, but tonight I needed that tiny bit of courage. The conversation at first was painfully stiff. They babbled about the weather, the ambience, the menu filler words. I intentionally avoided any mention of the apartment or the money, letting the tension build inside them instead of me. When the main course plates were cleared, Daniel finally spoke. "Mom, about the apartment, we wanted to say we understand why you reacted the way you did. That message was awful. The timing couldn't have been worse. We're really sorry." Emily quickly joined in. "Yes, Mrs. Miller. I was stressed and said something I shouldn't have. Of course you're welcome in our home anytime." "I understand," I answered calmly, taking another measured sip. "People make mistakes." Daniel exhaled with relief. About the apartment deal, the developer agreed to bring the contract back, with only a small penalty. "But actually, I've already thought about everything," I said softly, interrupting him, "and I've decided to help the two of you buy the house." A wave of relief washed over their faces, visible, unmistakable. "Mom, that's amazing." "I can't thank you enough," Daniel breathed. "It matters to me too," I smiled gently. "Family is still family." Then I reached into my purse and pulled out a black folder. "I also brought a few documents, just so everything is clear this time." Daniel's eyebrows pinched. "Mom, we don't need, really. We can just go to the bank." "It's just a draft," I insisted lightly. "Something simple so we all understand the terms before involving the bank. A straightforward agreement between us." I placed 3 contracts neatly on the table. They're basic. They outline what I'll contribute and what your responsibilities are. My lawyer, Mr. Lawrence Barnes, prepared them. Emily's forehead creased. "You have a lawyer?" "There's quite a bit you don't know about me," I replied with a faint smile. "Just read them carefully and sign. Then we can finalize the transfer on Monday." Daniel skimmed quickly, the way he always did when finances were involved. Emily read slower, though I could tell she wasn't truly absorbing details, just looking for the end result. "Everything looks fine," Daniel said, picking up the pen. "Are you sure you've actually read them?" I asked quietly. "There are a few special clauses about what happens if the agreement is broken." "Mom, I trust you." Those words cut straight through me. I had trusted him once too, and he'd stolen from me for 5 years. Daniel signed all 3 copies. Then he passed the pen to Emily. She hesitated briefly, then signed as well. I slipped the documents carefully back into the black folder. "Good," I said, inhaling deeply. "Now we can talk. For real." "What do you mean, Mom?" Daniel asked, the smile evaporating from his face. I pulled out a second folder. This one read, "You have just signed 3 incredibly interesting documents," I said evenly. Daniel stiffened. "The first," I continued, "is your confession, Daniel. It details how you forged my signature for 5 years, withdrawing roughly $120,000 and funneling it into Emily's business." His face drained of color. Emily's lips parted in horror. "The second," I said, turning to her, "is your statement, Emily, confirming you knew exactly where the money came from and used it to build your architecture firm." "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "And the third document," I finished, is the transfer of full ownership of Preston Architecture and Design to me, effective immediately. I opened the red folder and laid out copies of forged slips, bank statements, and handwriting analysis reports. "We're not celebrating submission tonight," I said steadily. "We're celebrating my freedom." The bank uncovered everything after I canceled the apartment transfer. A routine audit exposed it all. Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Emily began to cry, her perfect composure cracking. "Mom, this is a joke, right?" Daniel whispered. "If it's a joke, son, then you began it 5 years ago when you started stealing from me. Or maybe it started when you excluded me from a party paid with my own money." "Mom, I can explain. There is no explanation for betrayal." My voice sliced through his. "Only consequences." I finished the last sip of wine and set the glass down softly. "You have 2 choices." Daniel swallowed hard. Emily trembled. "1. I take these straight to the police. Tomorrow morning, both of you will be charged with fraud, forgery, and theft. With this amount and this duration, Daniel, you could face real prison time." Emily's voice cracked. "And the second, option 2. You follow exactly what you signed. Daniel, you forfeit your inheritance, repay every dollar, leave Chicago, and end all contact with me. Emily, you transfer the company to my name immediately. No fights, no delays." Silence swallowed the table. Daniel suddenly looked a decade older. Emily shook as she cried, anger smoldering beneath the tears. "It's your choice," I said, standing. "I placed money for my part of the bill on the table. You have 24 hours. After that, I file everything with the police." "Mom," Daniel's voice cracked open. "How could you do this?" I looked into his eyes, not as a mother blinded by love, but as a woman who finally saw clearly. "No, Daniel. The real question is, how could you do this to me? I give you everything, my love, my time, my money, and you betrayed me." Then I turned and walked out. I didn't look back once. Outside, the Chicago sky was bright and cloudless. I took a long breath. The plan was in motion. All that remained was to see which path they'd take. I didn't realize then that this was only the start of a deeper transformation, that the true reckoning wasn't just exposing them. It was rediscovering parts of myself I'd buried long ago. The next morning, just as I was brewing coffee, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "We accept your conditions. Please don't report us." Short. No excuses, no begging, just surrender. 2 people who had cornered themselves. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling, the same one John and I had looked up at during 16 years of marriage. A strange feeling washed over me, not happiness, not relief, but a quiet peace, a steady calm that comes only when one chapter closes and another begins. "So what now, John?" I whispered, as if my late husband could hear me. "What do I do with a victory that tastes this bitter?" There was no going back. The documents were signed. The plan had worked. A new part of my life, and a version of myself I had never imagined, was beginning. Monday morning, I went to Lawrence's office in downtown Chicago, a sleek glass tower mirroring the skyline. He greeted me with a firm handshake, eyes sharp but calm. "So they agreed?" he asked, settling behind his heavy wooden desk. Not surprising. Their other option was far worse. "What happens next?" I asked, feeling oddly hollow despite everything. "Now we follow every clause to the letter," he said, opening the folder. "First, the company transfer. I've scheduled the notarization for tomorrow morning. Emily must be present." "She'll be there," I said. Fear of exposure would keep her compliant. "Next, the repayment. $120,000 is no small sum. I doubt they can do it at once." "I planned for that," I said. "The contract sets a 24-month repayment plan." "Good. And leaving the city?" "I gave them 30 days, enough time to relocate." Lawrence studied me quietly. "Mrs. Miller. Miller, I've been doing this for more than 30 years. I've seen families fall apart over far smaller issues. Are you absolutely sure you want to cut all ties with your son? You still have a moment to rethink." I didn't answer. Was I really prepared to sever the final connection I had to my only child? The response rose inside me, clear, painful, and definite. When I uncovered the embezzlement, I realized it was only the tip of everything. The real betrayal had begun long ago, the day my son started treating his mother like an ATM instead of family. "Some injuries never close." Lawrence gave a slow nod. "I understand. Then we need to ensure your rights are completely protected." Over the next few days, everything unfolded exactly the way we planned. The company transfer was finalized at a notary office downtown. Emily arrived in a black dress. looking as though she were attending a funeral, perhaps the funeral of her own ambition. She avoided my eyes as she signed the papers, turning full ownership over to me. The first repayment came right on schedule. Daniel arranged automatic monthly transfers so he wouldn't have to speak to me. By the third week, an email arrived with their new address in a small Midwestern town a few hundred miles from Chicago. Daniel had taken a low-paying job at a small construction company. I thought I would feel victorious, but instead an odd emptiness settled in me, like winning a war while still battling something deeper, the lifelong habit of sacrificing myself for others. That Friday, as Linda and I closed our shops, she looked straight at me and asked, "So what now, Anne? You gonna sit around and stare at clouds or actually do something with that company that just landed in your hands?" Do something? I hesitated. I don't know a thing about architecture or interior design. So what? She said. You understand business. You built your craft shop from zero. Now you can hire people who know what you don't. Why not use this as a fresh start? To continue a business built on stolen money? I asked. Linda rolled her eyes. No, silly. To turn it into something brand new, something that finally belongs to you. That sentence planted a seed. Within days, I began to view the company not as a symbol of betrayal, but as a doorway to a new path. The next morning, I visited the office for the first time as the owner, a beautiful, modest building in Lincoln Park. A young secretary, Rachel, greeted me nervously. Good morning, Mrs. Miller. Emily left all the documents you requested. Thank you. How long have you been here? Almost 3 years, ma'am. Do you enjoy your work? She paused. I do, but I'm worried about what changes might come. That's fair. I glanced at the walls covered in photos of luxury design projects. Who are our main clients? Mostly high-end apartments, villas, and townhouses on the north side, she replied. What about community or affordable housing projects? Her eyes widened. We've never done anything like that, I see. All morning, I reviewed clients, financials, active projects. The company was smaller than I expected, still profitable, full of potential, but everything felt elegant, cold, and soulless. At lunch, I stepped outside and saw cramped, temporary housing in the distance, a harsh contrast to the glamorous designs I'd been looking at. That's when the idea formed. What if this company became something else entirely? What if we served wealthy clients? Yes, but also used part of our resources to create affordable housing designs, functional living spaces, and training programs for underprivileged youth? I went back inside, called Rachel, and said directly, I'm restructuring the whole company. We'll maintain ongoing projects, but our future direction will change. Change how? She asked. A firm that balances profit with social impact, affordable community design, housing, consulting for low-income families, and training programs for young people. Rachel stared for a moment, then smiled slowly. Honestly, that's why I studied architecture. I only worked on luxury stuff because I had no other choice. So you'll stay? Yes, and I know others who believe in this too. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into work. I hired 2 young, socially minded architects Rachel recommended. Lawrence advised on legal structure. I studied business models, blending profit with community service. The old company name had to disappear. It carried too much darkness. Soon I settled on a new one. New spaces, architecture and social transformation. A student from the South Side designed the logo, modern but full of warmth. Linda, with her lifelong business instincts, became my closest partner. One afternoon in my kitchen, she said, you need a launch event. Something that shows this isn't the same company at all. It's a rebirth. I'm not sure I'm ready. You are. Make it big. Invite the media, community leaders. Let Chicago see this new beginning. She was right. I needed this, not just for the business but for myself. We scheduled the event for a month later. The office was renovated to match our vision. And then a bold idea hit me. I sent invitations to Daniel and Emily. Are you sure? Lawrence asked. That's risky. No, I replied. It's a message. They need to see that from their betrayal I created something meaningful. That the money they took is now serving something better. He didn't like it, but he respected my choice. The week of the event flew by. Renovations finished just in time. The catering was handled by students from a culinary program for disadvantaged youth. The guest list grew: journalists, community leaders, professionals. A local TV station even requested a live interview. You'll be fine, Linda told me. Just speak from the heart. On the morning of the event, I woke before sunrise. Watching the city wake, I thought about how far I'd come from a retired teacher, betrayed by her son, to a woman leading a firm with a social mission. A shift from victim to leader. I dressed in a blue suit. I'd bought for the occasion, not to impress, but to steady myself. Small silver earrings, light makeup. The woman in the mirror looked almost unfamiliar, calmer, stronger, radiating an inner steadiness I'd never felt before. Hours before the event, I arrived to oversee the last touches. The office was unrecognizable, vibrant walls, artwork by community artists, boards showcasing our projects. A corner displayed models created by public school students in our workshops. Guests began arriving: architects, journalists, housing department representatives. Rachel and the new team moved confidently through the room, explaining our vision. While speaking with someone from housing development, I noticed Daniel and Emily walk in. They looked uneasy, like outsiders stepping into a place that no longer welcomed them. Our eyes met. I gave a small nod, nothing more. At 8 p.m., a reporter approached for the live interview. We stood before the new logo. Lights on, camera focused. We're here with Mrs. Ann Miller, founder of New Spaces, a Chicago-based architectural firm following a new model. Mrs. Miller, what inspired you to merge commercial work with social programs? I inhaled deeply and looked straight into the camera, fully aware Daniel and Emily were among the listeners. This idea grew out of a profound shift in my own life. At 61, I discovered that starting over has no expiration date. Sometimes the deepest betrayals become the doorway to the most unexpected beginnings. I noticed Daniel's face lose all color. The reporter leaned in, fascinated. Betrayal. Could you explain? I smiled faintly. Let's just say I came into possession of this company under circumstances I didn't foresee. And rather than continue a business built only on prestige and profit, I wanted to reshape it into something that genuinely serves the community. I talked about our mission to open the world of architecture to everyone, to create dignified spaces for people who are often forgotten. I shared details of our first initiative, renovating a suburban daycare center, and explained how every company profit would now contribute to the Rebirth Foundation, a nonprofit focused on helping women rebuild their lives after hardship. When the interview wrapped up, I scanned the room for Daniel and Emily. They were slipping out quietly. When our eyes met, I saw something in Daniel more than guilt or alarm. It was the realization that I had not simply survived what he did. I had transformed it into something far beyond either of us. Linda stepped beside me, softly squeezing my hand. I whispered, "Revenge isn't just a dish best served cold, it's a feast meant to feed an entire community." That night wasn't just the unveiling of a company. It was the moment I came back to life, a moment where I understood that self-love isn't selfish at all. It's the foundation upon which every other kind of love is built. I had turned wounds into purpose and betrayal into legacy. 6 months after New Spaces opened its doors, everything looked different both in the company and in me. What had started as an act of retaliation had grown into something much larger, something alive, and evolving in ways I never imagined. The TV interview created a powerful wave of attention. Within a week, requests came from magazines, newspapers, and even a podcast focused on women reinventing themselves in midlife. My story, at least the gentler version I allowed the public to hear, touched people deeply. A journalist once told me, "You've become a symbol of renewal and resilience." I had never pictured myself that way. My whole life, I had been the one who bent, who forgave, who put others before herself. Now I was being seen as someone who stood firm. New Spaces grew naturally, pulling in both new commercial clients and social partnerships. Rachel became an outstanding manager, handling daily operations, while I became the guiding spirit and public face of the firm. Our first milestone was finishing the daycare renovation, transforming a cramped, temporary setup into a bright, safe, joyful place. On opening day, when I saw children running through their colorful classrooms, I burst into tears. A teacher held my hand and said, "Mrs. Miller, you don't know what this means. These kids have never had a place truly made for them." Through my tears, I smiled. I had changed lives using the same money that was once supposed to fund Daniel and Emily's luxury apartment. Life, it turns out, has a poetic way of settling its scores. As the company expanded, Lawrence and I worked together to officially create the Rebirth Foundation. The legal process was complex. "We need to define its exact purpose," he said. "Who will it help? How will it function? What resources will sustain it?" Those questions pushed me to examine my intentions deeply. After consulting with social workers and therapists, we decided the foundation would support women. Over 50 women starting anew after divorce, widowhood, abandonment, or financial collapse. There are lots of programs for younger women, I told Lawrence, but so few for older women who face not just money problems, but age discrimination and the belief that their time has passed. The foundation wouldn't only give financial aid. It would offer legal help, therapy, job skills, business coaching, and, when necessary, temporary housing. One afternoon, while we were discussing potential locations, a sudden idea struck me. What Linda later called a poetic masterpiece. What if I used the money Daniel has been repaying to buy the very apartment he and Emily once wanted, I suggested, and turn it into the foundation's headquarters? Lawrence chuckled. Your sense of poetic justice is remarkable, Mrs. Miller. I contacted the real estate agency that same week. Strangely, the apartment was still on the market. I began negotiations with my own, honestly earned money. 3 months later, everything was finalized. Daniel's monthly repayments became part of the funds that purchased the very place he had once hoped to call home. There was something beautifully symmetrical about it. The day I signed the ownership documents, the sky was spotless and blue. Leaving the notary's office, I felt a deep, peaceful satisfaction, not just from letting an emotional chapter close, but from initiating something meaningful. I walked through a nearby park, watching the sunlight shimmer across the city, overwhelmed with gratitude at how life can turn in the most unexpected ways. Turning the apartment into the Rebirth Foundation's headquarters became New Space's next major mission. By then, our team included 5 architects and 2 interior designers, all filled with passionate determination. We're not building a place that feels like a shelter, I told them. We're creating a home of rebirth. These women don't want sympathy. They want dignity. We chose a modern but warm aesthetic. The rooms would be flexible for counseling, workshops, training sessions. The rooftop was transformed into a healing garden where women could plant seeds and watch new life grow. Throughout the 3 months of remodeling, I personally interviewed every professional who would join the foundation: psychologists, attorneys, financial mentors. I wanted people who were not only competent but empathetic. Many were women who, like me, had once been forced to start again. Why did you decide to create this foundation? Gloria, a 58-year-old psychologist, asked during her interview. Have you ever had to start over yourself? I paused, then replied softly. I found out my only son had deceived me, had taken my money on the very day I planned to transfer my life savings to buy him an apartment. Gloria didn't show pity, only a soft, understanding look, one that suggested she already knew the story beneath the surface. When she asked how I had managed to turn so much pain into something meaningful, I simply smiled. By refusing to play the victim in my own life, I decided to rewrite the ending myself. She nodded gently. That's exactly what we need to teach other women to do, she said. The grand opening of the Rebirth Foundation was scheduled on a day filled with symbolism. Exact 1 year after the night Daniel texted me, telling me not to come to Emily's birthday dinner. A full year that had reshaped everything. We organized a formal event with city officials, women's groups, and members of the press. I wanted women all across America to understand that starting over is never too late. The day before the inauguration, I got an unexpected call from the state where Daniel now lived. Mom, his voice was rough, exhausted. It's me. My chest tightened. We hadn't spoken since that night in the restaurant almost a year earlier. Hello, Daniel. I read about your foundation at the apartment Emily and I were planning to buy. That's right. The opening is tomorrow. He went quiet for a long stretch. I waited without pushing him. I'd like to come, he said at last. I just want to see what you've turned all this into. I hadn't expected that. Not once had I imagined my son saying those words. Why? I asked. Because I need to understand how you transformed our tragedy into something bigger than both of us. I hesitated. I had never planned to let him attend such a meaningful moment. But maybe there was purpose in allowing him to witness what had grown from his choices. You can come, I said finally, as an ordinary guest. No attention, no introductions, and you cannot bring Emily. We're not together anymore, he replied quietly. 4 months ago, she said, she couldn't stay with a man who'd lost everything: status, money, and his mother. A part of me felt a small, cold satisfaction Emily had revealed who she truly was. But another part, the mother inside me, felt a faint ache. I'm sorry, I said, not fully sure if I meant it. Don't be. You were right about her. And about a lot of things. The next morning, Chicago's sky was bright and clear, as if the city itself wanted to celebrate. The Rebirth Foundation headquarters looked perfect, every detail arranged to reflect dignity, renewal, and hope. I arrived earlier than everyone else, wanting a moment of stillness before the crowd arrived. I moved through each room slowly, remembering the long road that had brought me here. The walls that were once meant for Daniel and Emily's luxury now sheltered women learning to rebuild after devastation. The ceremony began exactly on time. The former living area, now a spacious multi-purpose hall, was full. I saw familiar faces everywhere. Linda, elegant in teal, sat in the front. Attorney Lawrence stood at the back, alert and observant. Rachel and the New Spaces team mingled near the garden. Then I spotted Daniel, leaning against a wall in a plain shirt and jeans, a completely different man from the polished version he once tried to be. When our eyes locked, he gave a small nod. I returned it, calm and steady. I stepped up to the podium, surprisingly at peace. Every woman here carries scars no one can see, I began. Scars from betrayal, pain, shattered dreams. The question isn't whether we're hurt. Pain is inevitable. What matters is what we choose to do with it. I spoke about rebirth, about transforming pain into purpose, about doors that appear in the ashes of lost trust. The Rebirth Foundation was born from a deep wound, I said. But I wanted it to become a place of healing. This isn't just a building. It's a symbol of choice, the choice not to remain a victim, but to continue writing your own story. I could feel Daniel watching me, his gaze heavy with shame, regret, and something like admiration. After the ceremony, he approached. His face looked older, lined with exhaustion, streaked with silver hair. "It's unbelievable, Mom. You turned something awful into something remarkable." "Thank you," I replied softly. I offered nothing more. A gulf still separated us, but somewhere, a fragile bridge was beginning to form. "If I told you I finally understand everything, that I see how deeply I hurt you, would you believe me?" he asked. "Understanding is only the first step, Daniel. The first step toward what? Maybe toward becoming a better man." He nodded. "When you canceled the apartment transfer, did you already imagine all this? Did you see this foundation in your mind then?" I smiled. "No. Back then I only knew one thing: I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel small ever again. Everything else came one step at a time." A reporter approached for an interview, and Daniel stepped back. "Maybe we'll talk later," he said. "Maybe," I answered, promising nothing. While I spoke to the reporter, I caught sight of him slipping quietly out of the hall. I wasn't sure we would ever fully reconcile, but I realized I wasn't living for revenge anymore. I was living for purpose. That afternoon, after the guests were gone, I climbed to the rooftop garden glowing under the sunset. Linda joined me, resting a hand on the railing. "Anne, when you told me about Daniel last year, I thought you'd never stand again. But look at you now, strong, calm, more alive than I've ever seen." I smiled. I've learned that the best revenge isn't making someone pay for what they did. It's becoming someone they never imagined you could be. A year later, we celebrated the Rebirth Foundation's first anniversary. No reporters, no officials, just my team, and the 32 women who had finished the program, whom we called the Reborn. During the small ceremony, a 67-year-old woman named Teresa stood up to speak. She said that after her husband died, she discovered he had left her with nothing but debt and despair. "When I came here, I felt like life was already over," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "I thought I was too old. No one would hire me, no one would rent to me, and I had nothing to begin with." She paused, meeting my eyes. "But Mrs. Ann showed me that even the cruelest betrayals can turn into gifts if we're brave enough to change." The room burst into applause. Teresa smiled. "Now I have my own bakery. I'm debt-free. And most importantly, I have my self-respect back." Tears stung my eyes as the applause echoed. If someone had told me 2 years earlier that Daniel's cold message would become the beginning of all this, I would have laughed. That evening, after everyone left, I walked through the foundation again. Each room held deep meaning: the therapy room with its soft chairs, the creative workshop full of color, the legal office where volunteers helped women reclaim their rights, the kitchen filled with warm bread and laughter. On the rooftop, surrounded by plants the women had grown, the city lights glittered like fallen stars. I thought of the past 2 years, the new life, the new challenges, the new people who had become family. My phone buzzed. A message from Lawrence. "The meeting with the mayor's office is confirmed. They're very interested in expanding the foundation's model." I smiled. If that happened, Rebirth would touch even more communities. I called him Lawrence now. Our relationship had grown past business, starting with casual coffees, then long conversations that stretched till sunset. I didn't know exactly what was blooming between us. I only knew my heart finally felt alive again. Then came weekend lunches, concerts, art exhibitions. What existed between us wasn't romance in the usual, youthful sense. Both of us carried too many memories, too many deep bruises from the past. We understood that at our age, honesty was the most valuable form of affection. What we shared was a mature companionship, one that occasionally slipped into intimacy, but without labels, pressure, or expectation. We don't need to define this, he once told me when I hesitated to call it anything. Let it be what it is, one day at a time. Those words felt like a light breeze brushing against my soul. All my life, I had been confined inside clearly defined roles: daughter, wife, mother, widow. Now, for the first time, I could exist simply as myself, with no explanations and no apologies. The phone rang again. To my surprise, it was Daniel. Since the Rebirth Foundation's opening, we had kept only minimal, polite contact. 6 months earlier, he had moved back to Chicago and taken a modest position at a small construction firm. Every now and then he would send a greeting, a birthday message, or a link to an article about the foundation. "Mom, I heard you're meeting the mayor's office tomorrow," he said. "I just wanted to wish you luck. I know how important this expansion is to you." I was caught off guard. This wasn't public information yet. Perhaps Lawrence had mentioned it. Their professions crossed paths at times. I hesitated before responding. The wound between us had healed, but it had left a thin, tender scar. I wasn't sure how to navigate this newer version of Daniel, quieter, humbler, trying to make amends. "Thank you, son. I truly appreciate that," I wrote back. After a beat of thought, I added another message. "If all goes well, we'll need an architect for the new centers. Someone who understands the heart of the foundation." His reply came immediately. "It would be an honor to contribute in any way." I stared at the screen, overwhelmed by a swirl of emotions. Part of me was wary. Another part, the mother, longed to believe my son was changing. I set the phone aside. Some decisions require distance and time. The next day, the meeting with the mayor's office surpassed everything I had hoped for. They not only approved opening 3 new Rebirth Foundation branches in low-income neighborhoods, but they also proposed building a citywide program based on our model. "Your approach is remarkably unique," said the director, a man in his 50s with intelligent, lively eyes. "Most programs focus on young mothers or domestic violence survivors. You chose mature women rebuilding from the ground up, and the outcomes speak for themselves." I walked out of City Hall, feeling as if I were floating. Lawrence walked beside me, grinning. "You deserve this, Anne. This is a real turning point." We celebrated at a small Italian restaurant nearby. When our glasses of Prosecco touched, I suddenly recognized how completely my life had transformed. 2 years ago, I was a woman dismissed and valued only for what I could provide financially. And now I sat opposite a man who saw me for who I truly was, honoring a milestone that could reshape hundreds of futures. "What's on your mind?" Lawrence asked when he noticed my quietness. "I'm thinking about how life can pivot. Because of one moment, one decision." He nodded immediately, knowing I was referring to that morning in the bank. "What I admire most," he said, "isn't just that you turned betrayal into purpose, but that you did it without letting anger poison you." I smiled softly. I knew that if I kept feeding resentment, I'd still be allowing them to control me, even after they were gone. I didn't want to give them that power. After lunch, we wandered through the old downtown district discussing the next steps: more staff, more volunteers, more funding. I repeated the need for the right architect, and Lawrence asked directly, "Are you thinking about giving Daniel the opportunity?" I replied with a faint smile. "I'm thinking about considering it. I'm still unsure." That evening, while having dinner with Lawrence in my apartment, I shared my decision with him. Pouring more wine, he smiled and said, "For the foundation, and maybe even for both of us, I think you've made the right call." I nodded quietly. "Maybe. Time will tell." Lawrence's eyes softened. "What I admire most about you, Anne, is how you turn every ending into a new beginning." I couldn't help but smile. Over these past 2 years, my life shifted from pain into purpose, from betrayal into transformation, from the close of one chapter into the opening of another, more honest, more complete. Daniel's message that year, the one uninviting me from his wife's birthday dinner, sent just moments before I was about to transfer my entire savings to buy them an apartment It should have been just one more humiliation added to a lifetime of hurts, but instead, it became the moment that finally woke me up. The real revenge was never about watching Daniel or Emily suffer, though I won't deny that seeing them face consequences brought its own small satisfaction. The true revenge was becoming the woman they never imagined I could be. The apartment that was supposed to show off their status became a center that now helps women rebuild their lives. And the money they drained from me, I turned it into funding for fresh starts. That was the sweetest victory of all, realizing that even in my 60 seconds my life was far from finished, and the most meaningful chapters were only beginning. Today, at 64, I can say that the last 3 years have changed me more than any other time in my life. And it all started with that cruel message, "Mom, you're not invited. My wife doesn't want you there." Those words shattered me, but they also opened my eyes. I finally understood that I had become nothing more than a walking wallet, useful only when money was involved. That day, sitting inside the bank branch, I stared at the computer screen and canceled the transfer. I didn't know then that this single act would reveal years of secret withdrawals Daniel had made without my knowledge. I never imagined the victim would someday become the author of her own story, or that from those ashes the rebirth foundation would rise. Life is strange. What was once meant to be a luxury home for my son and his wife is now the heart of a foundation dedicated to helping middle-aged women start over. Ironically, the company Emily built with the money she took from me now helps sponsor our humane architecture community projects. Every brick, every smile from a woman we've supported, every new center we open in a struggling neighborhood, each one is a louder, stronger response than any revenge ever could be. My relationship with Daniel is still something under slow reconstruction. There are no miracles here, and forgiveness hasn't fully arrived. Some wounds take years to mend if they ever do, but there is room for hope, room to rebuild gradually, layer by layer. And I'll admit, Daniel's contributions to the architectural side of the foundation have been genuinely admirable. I can see real change in him. Emily, on the other hand, left the moment she realized there was no wealth or status to cling to, exactly as I always suspected. As for me, I've uncovered sides of myself I never knew existed. Anne, the leader. Anne, the visionary who can stand before a crowd and inspire. Anne, the 64-year-old woman in a peaceful, mature relationship with Lawrence, free of labels, full of calm. And Anne, the woman who finally understands that self-love isn't selfish, it's the base upon which every other kind of love is built. If, while listening to this, you see a part of yourself reflected in my story, if you've ever been used, dismissed, or pushed aside by people who should have valued you, remember this. It's never too late to begin again. It's never too late to reject disrespect and choose yourself. You may not open a foundation like I did, but the moment you put your dignity first, something extraordinary happens. New doors appear. Genuine people walk into your life. And someday, you'll look back and realize that maybe your best chapters were still unwritten. Sharing this story hasn't been easy. I've had to reopen old wounds and revisit pain I thought had faded, but I'm sharing it because I know countless women out there have lived a version of this story, women who confused sacrifice with love, who believed their worth had expired. To every one of you listening, your story isn't finished. The period you think ends your sentence is really just the beginning of a new chapter, one deeper, richer, truer than before. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment that forced you to rethink how you live, love, or treat yourself? Share your story in the comments. Your words might be the light someone else desperately needs. And if you want to continue this journey with me, where every story brings a lesson and every pain becomes a chance to grow, stay with us. Let's keep turning these pages together, because often the most beautiful things in life only begin when we dare to rewrite our own story.